Hi everyone, it's Kelly from Kelly's Bead Boutique. I'm sorry for the scratchy voice, but I've had that nasty cold and flu for a couple weeks now, but I had to get back to filming. So you'll just have to listen to a little bit of a frog for a bit. Anyway, do you love Czech glass as much as I do? That's actually one of the perks of owning a bead store. I get to travel and buy beads. And a few years ago, I got to go to the Czech Republic and not only purchase some of my favorite beads of all time, but I got to watch them being made, which was just an incredible experience. So today I'm going to show you how to use some of those gorgeous fire polished Czech glass beads. I came up with this bracelet a couple years ago. It's a great way to not only use maybe some new ones that you have, but maybe some old ones that you've got sitting around in your stash. So come and join me, listen to my old creaky voice, and I'm going to show you how to make this really fun bracelet. Alrighty, so let's get started. So I'm going to show you how to make this Czech glass cuff today. You can see I've got a couple different samples. I've got one with blacks and grays and whites, and I've got another one with browns and greens and creams. Really, you can kind of go crazy here and just use anything that you want. And this is a really good way of using up some of your old beads. Maybe you've got a good stash. You can just, use any sort of random pattern. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so what I have here today is some 24, excuse my sniffles because you're going to hear them throughout the video, I'm sure. So I've got some 24 gauge craft wire, and I have pre-strung on about 150 4mm Czech Glass Firepolish. I just sort of picked 3 different colors on our wall here. Of course, I always gravitate to the blues and browns. That's sort of my thing. And one is sort of a matte, and then I've got another sort of purpley irisy one, and then sort of a a brown sort of chocolatey one. And I don't really put them on in a pattern. I just put them on my bead mat, kind of roll them all around like that, and then sort of randomly pick them up on here. And that's what I end up with. So 24 gauge wire, you can see you need about as long as your beads are. So that's, I don't know, maybe like 2 feet of wire. Plus we're going to need some for winding around on our leather. I also have about an 8-inch piece of 3mm leather. Now, what happens here is it does take up some of the inside diameter on your wrist. So you want to add your wrist size and then at least another inch. And then you can kind of judge from there. And you can also lengthen it with different endings, and I'll show you how to do that at the end. But you have to be aware that that is going to take up a little bit of extra room on your wrist. So don't just go with your wrist size when it comes to the leather. I also have a couple little endings. I've got a magnet that I'm going to use today, a couple of these little end crimps that we're going to use. I've also got a piece of safety chain. I'm going to show you how to use that. And I've got some jump ring. Okay, we also have, you need sort of a mandrel of sorts, and you want to have your mandrel about the same size, maybe slightly larger than your 3mm leather. So I've got a knitting needle here. It doesn't really matter what you use. We're just going to be using it to wind around. I also am going to be using a pair of bent chain nose pliers, a pair of chain nose pliers, and a pair of cutters. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap my pre-strung wire around this little mandrel. So what I do is I just take it and sort of line it up on top here, and I always like to leave a little bit extra because I find it easier to have something to hold on to. So what I do is I grab just a little chunk, maybe 2 inches worth of beads, and I sort of hold it against my thumb, and I push against my thumb on the other side because you want to have some tension in here. And you're going to wind that around your mandrel. I want to make sure I'm on camera here. So I'm just going to keep pushing on these beads so that I don't end up with a lot of wire showing. And it doesn't matter if there's gaps. We're not trying to make this look perfect on here. What I can do is cinch it all up later. But what I want to make sure is that I'm not getting a lot of wire on showing in there. So it's a little bit hard to show you because I've got cameras and all sorts of things in the way here. So maybe what I'm going to do is scoosh it down there so I've got a little less to work with there. So that should be a bit easier. There we go. So you can see I'm just pushing against my thumbnail so that I can create a little bit of tension, and that creates a little bit less wire showing. So I'm just going to move that down a bit and just keep winding that around. And I'm not really doing much with my left hand except holding this all together. And you can see it goes pretty darn fast. Now, lots of times when you're making things with Czech glass beads, you'll end up with a few leftovers. So this is the perfect project. One of my staff members, she had a whole whack of 4mm beads, and she just threw them all on her tray and just randomly picked them up and made this really beautiful, colorful bracelet using all of her little orphans that she had in her bead box. So this is a great project for that. All right, so I'm just going to finish this up, and then I'm going to show you how to end the bracelet. All right, I've come to the end here, and I'm just going to keep winding around. And there I've got my little bit of wound up beads. Doesn't that look pretty already? All right, so I'm just going to pop that off of my mandrel and put that to the side. And now I'm going to take my piece of leather and I'm going to put it through the middle of the beads. And sometimes when you get to the middle of this, it can get a little hard to get it all the way through. So you sometimes have to open these up, take maybe a pair of pliers or a pair of tweezers and sort of push that through. It's sometimes right about there, which is exactly what's happening with mine. It gets a little bit caught, but you can just kind of take a pair of pliers. You don't want to, you've got to be very careful with your leather. You don't want to damage your leather, but you can sort of push it along and just sort of guide it like that. So I'm going to finish this up and get that pushed through, and then I'll come back and show you how to finish this up. All right, so I've got that all put on there. So it was a little bit of a struggle. Sometimes it is a bit hard because this leather isn't super rigid. So I ended up having to sort of take my pliers and sort of push it up. Now I did end up taking off about 20 beads. I found that there was just too many beads on here. I don't know, so I usually use about 150, but maybe I put more than 150 on last night when I was tired and didn't notice. So now you can see that this is all sort of loose. So what you start to do now is you take this and sort of squish it around. So it's like you just sort of turning it in a circle, and it just tightens it all up. So I'm going away from me and just sort of tightening this up, and you'll see that it'll form a nice little tight spiral on there again. So now you can see it looks really pretty on there. So, and if you end up with a rogue bead like that, just push it back on. So now what I do is I like to even it up and make sure I've got even amounts of leather coming out either side. And then I'm going to take my one end here, and I'm going to push that bead back, make sure it's where it's supposed to be. And then I'm going to wrap this wire going away from me about 6 or 7 times. And I try to do it as nice and neat as I can. I always want everything to look like it's been professionally done. So I don't know how many times did I do that. That's maybe 5, 6, something like that. So I just kind of get a nice look on there and making sure that it's nice and snug. And then I'm going to come in with my pliers, and you want to make sure that you use the flush side, and I'm going to give that just a little snip, and then I come in with my chain nose pliers, and there's a little tiny burr there, so I just want to give it a little push into the leather. Now I don't want to push too hard because it'll flatten out your spiral there and it won't look so nice. So I just sort of guide it around and make sure that it's nice, nicely tucked in there. So, and if anything sort of came undone, you can kind of tighten it back up there. So now I'm going to go on the other end and do the exact same thing. Just tighten up my spiral a little bit, push any rogue beads out of the way, and I'm going to go around about 6 or 7 times. And I never really count, I just kind of do. And if one has 6 and one has 7, you know what? Nobody's going to be able to know except you. All right, so give that a little trim. Get my wire in excess out of the way, and I'm going to give that a little push down. Okay, so now you can see I've got my little bracelet all made here. So now I'm going to finish it up with the ends, and I'll show you how I add all of my embellishments. So I like to use these little magnets. If you do use the magnets, I do recommend putting a little bit of safety chain on so that you don't lose it. So I also have these little crimp ends. So what these are is, this one is a large one that's going to accommodate the 3mm leather. And you can see on the inside here, it has little dots on either side, and then this little bar in the middle. And that's the part that we're going to crimp down, and that's what holds it in. You don't need any glue or anything like that. So now when I put this on, I want to make sure that I'm going with sort of the way that the bracelet's going to go. So I want to make sure that this end is going this direction. If I had it this way, it's not going to lay correctly. So I want to push it down so that none of the leather is showing through. And then I take my chain nose pliers and I give it a squish in the middle. Just in the middle, you don't want to squish the outside. And you can see how it kind of just crimps that down. Now I go on the other side and repeat. And I just go back and forth a couple times, making sure that's on there nice and snug. And that is not going to go anywhere. You don't need any glue of any kind. So now I want to turn this and make sure I'm going with a natural flow of the bracelet again. Pop that on the end. And give it a little crimp. And turn it over. And repeat. And just go back and forth a couple times. Okay. So now I'm going to use a little jump ring. Now, I always like to use the smallest and heaviest jump ring that I can. So this is an 18 gauge jump ring, and it's about a 4.5 to 5 millimeter in size. And why I like to use those is they're nice and sturdy and they're going to hold everything together. If you use the wrong size jump rings and they're really flimsy, they're much easier to open up, but then everything's going to fall apart on you. So I'm going to take one pair of chain nose pliers and put it on one side, and I'm going to have the little cut at the top. Then I'm going to take my bent chain nose pliers and place them on the other side, and I'm going to open it up this way. You don't want to over open them up because you'll sort of break the neck and it makes it harder to put back together. Now I'm just going to split apart my little magnet here. So I like to do it in a bit of a sequence. So I take my jump ring and I put it on there. Then I put on my chain, and then I put on the little magnet. Now I take my pliers and turn them around, and we're going to have the magnet in the way there, which makes it a little bit hard to do up, but you just kind of have to muscle it in there, and I sort of jiggle it back and forth until it sort of snaps into place. Now I'm going to repeat on the other side. So I'm going to take my little jump ring. I'm going to turn those around. It's nice if you have this whole bit of your plier right on top of that jump ring. It makes it so much easier to open. Pop that on the end. Put my safety chain on, and that just makes it a little bit nicer, so that if you've got these magnets, which are fantastic, but they do catch on a metal and you might lose your bracelet, so the safety chain makes it so that you don't lose your bracelet. So that's all nicely done up. So now I'm just going to add my little charm. I always like to add a little charm, a little dangle, a tassel, something like that. It just makes it look a little nicer. And you're just going to add that on one of the ends there and do that up. So you can see this goes together pretty fast. I put my beads on my wire last night when I was at home. It only just takes, 10 minutes or so. So now when you do that up, you've got that nice little clasp there. You've got your safety chain so it's not going anywhere. And you've got your beautiful Czech cuff. So I just love this color combination. I always tend to gravitate towards those colors. But here's a few. I'm going to just move these out of the way. So here's my little samples of what I've got. Going to turn this one around. Oh, it goes that way. Okay, so I've got this one with the blacks and the silvers and the sort of gray tones in there, and I use black leather. And then I've also got on this one, I've got brown leather, and I used a toggle on this one and a different kind of an end cap. This is one that you glue in, so whether you have one that you glue in or one that you crimp, you can see you can come up with many different possibilities. So if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like. Please subscribe to my channel, and make sure that you go and you ding that little bell so that you get a notice when I put up my next video. So make sure to leave me a comment below, leave me a suggestion as to what you might like to see in the future, or leave me a little note saying what kind of colors you think you're going to make when you make your bracelet. And thank you so much for watching.